A forgotten house, a legal auction, and a stranger living inside claiming it was never mine. But the truth? She gave it up, on paper, on purpose. Now she wants it back, and she'll burn down the system to do it. Welcome to the fight for what's rightfully mine. I should have known something was off the second I turned onto that old gravel road. The trees seemed taller than I remembered, darker too. It had been over 3 years since I last saw the place with my own eyes. I bought the house site unseen, well, unseen in person. Just a handful of auction photos, a public record, and a desperate desire to own something that wasn't made of drywall and HOA policies. A forgotten house in the Colorado mountains? That was my dream. Remote, rough, and mine. The plan had always been to fix it up when life allowed, but life, as usual, had other plans. Work, bills, clients who just wanted to tweak the design a little and ended up rebuilding their entire homes. So the house sat, waiting. Until now. As I rounded the final bend, my truck's headlights swept across the clearing and my stomach dropped. The porch lights were on. That was impossible. I never installed any. And the house didn't look anything like what I remembered. It had a new roof. The cracked porch steps were gone, replaced with fresh wood. The front door had a goddamn wreath on it. For a solid 10 seconds, I just sat there, engine idling, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. Then instinct took over. I cut the ignition, grabbed my satchel from the passenger seat, where I kept all my property documents, and stepped out. The cold hit me like a slap. Fall here didn't play around. The air smelled like pine, wet earth, and someone else's wood smoke. I approached the porch slowly. Every board was firm under my boots. Someone had rebuilt it carefully, lovingly even. I knocked. Nothing. Then again louder. Footsteps. The door opened and a woman stood there. Late 40s, maybe early 50s, but the kind of face that wore a permanent frown as if smiling was taxable. Shoulder-length blonde hair tied back with a scarf. She looked me up and down like I'd tracked in something foul. "Can I help you?" she asked as if I were the one intruding. I blinked. "Yeah, I think you might be in the wrong house." "No," she said flatly. "This is my home." I laughed. Not maliciously, more in that stunned what-the-hell sort of way. "No, ma'am. This house was sold at county auction 3 years ago. I bought it. I've got the papers right here." She crossed her arms, unfazed. "This property belonged to my father. I'm his daughter. This is a family estate." I could feel my blood pressure rising, but I kept my tone level. "I understand this might be confusing, but according to Gunnison County, you, or whoever held the deed, let the taxes go unpaid for over 5 years. That triggered a lien sale. I won the bid. I have the title transfer, tax certificates, everything." She didn't even look at the folder I offered. Instead, she leaned on the door frame like I was a door-to-door scammer. "That sale was illegal. I never gave up my rights." I exhaled through my nose. "I'm sorry, what's your name?" "Karen Wilmot." Of course it was. "Well, Karen, I don't know what you believe happened, but you need to vacate the premises immediately. This house is legally mine." She smiled then, but it wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile someone wears when they think they've already won. "You should call the sheriff. Go ahead. Let's get this sorted." That's how I ended up on the porch of my own property, under the dim yellow of someone else's porch light, waiting for the county sheriff like a squatter. When Deputy Paulson arrived, he was polite, professional, and clearly exhausted. Probably just wanted to get through the shift without paperwork. I showed him my documents. Karen showed him a faded copy of a will with her name on it. Then she said something that made my jaw clench. "My father passed away 7 years ago. I was too grief-stricken to deal with the estate, but I never legally relinquished my inheritance. This man is trying to steal what's mine. I could see Paulson stiffen. Ma'am, did you file probate? Karen hesitated. No, it wasn't necessary. It's a family property. Paulson rubbed his temples. Okay, here's the deal. I can't make a ruling on this. This is a civil matter. You, he pointed at me, have documentation. That puts you in the clear for now. But you, he turned to her, are currently residing here. Without a court order, I can't forcibly remove you. But it's trespassing, I argued. He shrugged. Only if I have a court order stating she doesn't belong here. Karen smirked. I wanted to knock that look right off her face. I slept in my truck that night, not because I had to, but because I couldn't bring myself to leave. That house was mine. I dreamed of rebuilding it, breathing life into it. Instead, I found it already reborn. By someone who claimed it should never have left her hands. And I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. The next morning, I drove into town with one mission: get a lawyer and coffee, preferably in that order. My neck hurt from sleeping in the cab and my nerves were fried. I spent most of the night staring at the silhouette of my own damn house, watching the windows glow from the inside like it belonged to someone else, which, in the eyes of the law, it sort of did, at least for now. I found a small law office on Main Street that looked like it hadn't been remodeled since Reagan was president. The guy who took my case, Carter Lane, wore a corduroy blazer, wire-rimmed glasses, and had the tired eyes of a man who'd seen more family land disputes than wedding anniversaries. After scanning my paperwork, Carter nodded slowly. Looks clean. You bought it legally. The county followed procedure. Tax lien foreclosure. Public auction. Filed and recorded. Great, I said. So why the hell is there a woman living in my house telling me she owns it? He shrugged. Because she believes she does. Happens more than you'd think. Grief, denial, sometimes good old-fashioned entitlement. But here's the key. Did she ever file probate? She said no. Then she's out of luck. If she didn't assert her inheritance through court within the statute of limitations, she has no legal claim. The property defaults to the state and the sale stands, but he raised a finger. That doesn't mean she won't fight it, especially if she's already spent time and money fixing it up. I swallowed. She renovated the whole place. Carter let out a whistle. Then you've got a squat and improve situation. Civil courts hate those, because now we're not just dealing with ownership. We're dealing with occupancy, investment, and emotion. You'll need to file for eviction, maybe even quiet title. It'll take weeks, possibly months. Jesus. Oh, and you'll want to avoid direct confrontation. She might record you, or worse, make you look like the aggressor. Funny, considering what I'd find out later. I left Carter's office with a headache and a folder full of court filing instructions. On my way back up the mountain, I stopped by the local hardware store for a few motion lights and trail cams. If I wasn't legally allowed in the house, I could at least keep an eye on it from the tree line. That's when I ran into Henry. Old-timer Vietnam hat smelled like cedar and diesel. He was sitting outside the store on a bench, sipping something suspiciously brown from a thermos. You that fella up at the Wilmot place? He asked, squinting up at me. I own it, yeah. Well, he huffed, you might want to know that lady's been up there near a year. Had contractors in and out, hauled trash, put in new siding, even repointed the damn chimney. Told everyone it was her daddy's place and she was reclaiming it. Reclaiming? He nodded, and said the government tried to steal it from her, but she was taking it back. Folks figured it was a family dispute, none of our business. I sat down beside him. You think she knew about the auction? Henry raised an eyebrow. Son, she told me herself the county screwed her over. Said she refused to pay the taxes out of principle. Thought they wouldn't dare list it. When they did, she just waited until no one showed up, then moved in like nothing happened. So she knew it was sold? Hell yes, she did. She just figured nobody would fight her over it. I drove back up the mountain with a different fire in my gut. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. Karen knew exactly what she was doing. She passed on the inheritance, ignored the taxes, waited for it to go into auction, and then strolled back in like the queen of the mountain. I parked at the foot of the property this time, just outside the visible range of the house. The trail cam went up in the trees to the left, covering the front drive. The motion light I stashed on the far end of the property near the old woodshed. If Karen thought she could play homesteader, I'd play ghost. Quiet, patient, watching everything. That evening I saw her out on the porch sipping wine in a rocking chair that definitely hadn't been there when I bought the place. There was music playing softly from inside. Folk, maybe blues. Her teenage son, at least I assumed it was her son, walked out a moment later, handed her a phone, and said something I couldn't hear. She laughed, loudly. I clenched my jaw. The next day it got worse. A piece ran in the local paper, page 2. Headline, Family's Legacy Challenged by Auction Loophole. There was a photo of Karen standing proudly in front of the house, arms crossed, the American flag flapping behind her. The article read like a puff piece. Poor daughter returns to her childhood home only to find it sold out from under her. A Denver developer was trying to bulldoze her family's heritage. They even quoted her, "I'm just a mother trying to protect what's mine. My father built this home. I will not be pushed out by someone who sees it as a weekend project." No mention of the unpaid taxes, no mention of the auction, no mention of me by name, but just enough veiled hints that anyone with Wi-Fi and a real estate record could figure it out. I was being painted as the villain before I even had a chance to tell my side. And Karen knew it. Carter filed the initial eviction paperwork 3 days later. I would have done it sooner, but apparently the legal system doesn't give a damn about urgency unless someone's bleeding or on fire. Even then, maybe. The clerk at the courthouse gave me a stack of forms thick enough to knock someone unconscious and smiled like she enjoyed watching people drown in bureaucracy. Still, it felt like progress. Cold, slow-moving, passive-aggressive progress, but progress nonetheless. Meanwhile, Karen wasn't just sitting pretty. She came out swinging. I got served with a counterclaim 2 days later. Her attorney, some overly polished guy named Brent Holloway, filed a motion to void the sale, arguing that it was executed without proper notification to the rightful heir and constituted fraudulent transfer of estate property. He used phrases like constructive possession and inherited occupancy, like they were magical spells that would make me disappear in a puff of legal smoke. Carter read it, leaned back in his chair, and muttered, "They're throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks." "They actually think it'll work?" He shook his head. "Not legally, but it'll slow things down, which is the point." So now, instead of evicting one stubborn squatter, I was locked in a full-blown property dispute with a woman who was running a campaign like she was up for mayor of Misguided Martyrs. And she wasn't alone. Someone, gee, I wonder who, started a Facebook page called Save Wilmont House. The page painted Karen as a brave single mother standing against greedy developers and government overreach. There were photos of the house mid-renovation, videos of Karen talking about her childhood memories, and a post that referred to me as the carpetbagger from Denver. Classy. That week I caught my first real break, sort of. The county building inspector showed up unannounced at the property. Apparently, an anonymous tip had come in that unauthorized structural modifications were taking place. The irony? That tip came from Karen herself, except she didn't realize she'd shot herself in the foot. I followed the inspector around the property, staying behind the tree line, of course, since the court still hadn't ruled on entry, and watched as he poked around with a clipboard and a flashlight. When he came back down the hill, I approached him on the easement road. "You the new owner?" he asked. "Technically. Still waiting for the court to catch up with reality." He frowned. "Well, I can tell you this. The electrical work inside? Not permitted. Roof work, same thing. Interior framing, probably not up to code." "She did it all?" "Looks like it. Hired unlicensed contractors or did it herself. Either way, it's a mess. I'm gonna file a report, might get flagged as substandard construction." I almost smiled. "And what does that mean?" "If it's bad enough, the county can order the house vacated until it's brought up to code." Now we were getting somewhere. Carter submitted the inspector's report as supplemental evidence in our claim. A few days later, the judge issued a temporary injunction. Karen and her son were to vacate the house within 72 hours due to safety concerns. Not eviction, yet, but a start. I didn't celebrate, not yet. Because Karen, she didn't pack. She dug in. The following evening, I drove up near dusk, parked just out of view, and hiked through the back trail. The lights were still on, music playing, like nothing had changed. I got closer, careful to stay out of camera range, hers or mine, and caught a glimpse through the back window. Boxes, half-packed. And then I saw her on the phone, pacing the kitchen, visibly agitated. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but the expression on her face was pure theater, like she was rehearsing a monologue for court. When she turned her back, I ducked closer. That's when I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A little black device on the kitchen island, a digital voice recorder. Not playing, recording. She was recording herself. And something told me that wasn't the first time. The next morning, Deputy Paulson showed up to enforce the injunction. I followed him up the hill, watching from a distance. Karen came to the door in a housecoat, all innocent smiles and shaky hands. Claimed she didn't get the notice in time. That she had nowhere to go. Paulson didn't buy it. He gave her until sunset to leave, or he'd return with a formal removal order. But she wasn't done making noise. At 4 that afternoon, I got a visit from the local news. A skinny reporter in a too-tight blazer knocked on the door of my rental trailer at the foot of the hill. "Mr. Miller, I'm with Mountain View News. Ms. Wilmot says you've been harassing her, trying to force her out without due process. Would you care to comment?" I stared at him for a long second, then said, "Would you like to see my paperwork?" He blinked. Sure." I handed him the entire file. Auction notices, title deed, tax receipts, court filings, the inspector's report, even a notarized timeline of events. He flipped through it, eyebrows lifting higher and higher. "Ms. Wilmot also said you threatened her during a confrontation on September 12th. "That's funny," I said, "because on September 12th I was in Denver at my client's house installing custom cabinetry. I have receipts and witnesses and dash cam footage." He didn't say anything for a while. Eventually he folded the file shut and muttered, "This is a mess. You have no idea." That night Karen left. At least she physically left. 2 trucks, her son in one, she in the other. They disappeared down the mountain road around 10:30. But she didn't disappear from my life, not even close. I pulled into the driveway for the first time in months. No court orders hanging over me, no sheriffs watching from their squad cars. No woman in a housecoat trying to make me out as a homewrecker in a real estate soap opera. The porch was empty. The lights were off. Just the sound of wind rustling through pine needles and a faint creak from the old swing on the maple tree near the well. It should have felt like a victory. It didn't. I stepped inside and immediately smelled mold. Not just the faint, forgotten kind. This was heavy, wet, and angry. the kind of smell that made drywall squish under your fingers. The inside looked polished at first glance, fresh wood floors, new appliances in the kitchen, even curtains on the windows. But once I turned on the flashlight and walked around, the illusion cracked, literally. In the bathroom, the tiles were already separating from the wall. The caulking job looked like it had been done by someone in a hurry, or drunk. Upstairs, the guest bedroom ceiling bulged ominously. I pressed a finger into the center of the spot and immediately regretted it as my hand went straight through the drywall into something damp and definitely alive. I stepped back, wiped moldy insulation on my jeans, and cursed under my breath. Karen hadn't renovated the place. She'd dressed it up like a movie set, cosmetic crap to make it look clean, staged just enough to impress a newspaper or win sympathy. Underneath, it was rot, shortcuts, and violations. Carter came up the next day with a licensed building inspector we'd hired privately. This guy didn't even make it past the living room before he started shaking his head. "None of this is to code," he muttered. "The electrical's a fire hazard. No permits pulled on any of it. The plumbing looks like it was installed by a raccoon with a wrench." He found exposed wires behind drywall, makeshift junction boxes held together with duct tape, and a water heater rigged into the wall with a literal bungee cord. This entire renovation was illegal and dangerous, he concluded. Frankly, she's lucky no one got electrocuted. We filed the report immediately and brought it to the county. 2 days later, we got word. The county building department was issuing a formal violation notice, and they wanted the property vacated until all safety hazards were remediated. I let that sink in for a moment. Karen had broken into my house, claimed she owned it, renovated it without permission, and now I was the one being told to stay out, for safety reasons. I wasn't even angry, I was too tired for that. But then Carter called me the next morning with a voice that had just enough caffeine and venom to make me sit up. "You're gonna love this," he said. "The local tax assessor's office has been getting pressure to reclassify your property as a distressed asset." "A what?" "Distressed. Basically, they lower the market value for safety concerns or blight. That would drop your resale value and tax burden, but also make it a prime target for public acquisition, like, say, a fast-track buyout." I rubbed my temples. Who the hell would want to buy this mess? "Apparently," Carter said, "your friend Karen had a close relationship with the county's senior assessor, classmate, drinking buddy, maybe more. And she allegedly told him that if he could get the value dropped low enough and reclassify the property, she'd find a buyer who respects family history. Translation: someone friendly to her who'd sell it back to her under the table. You're telling me this was a setup from the beginning?" "Looks like it." The dots connected faster than I liked. She knew she'd lost the inheritance. She didn't fight the auction. She let it go to sale, watched from a distance, then walked right back in like it never happened. Renovated it just enough to make it look lived in. Leveraged public sympathy. Then tried to use her connections to tank the value so someone, maybe even her under a shell name, could buy it back dirt cheap. And I'd walked straight into the trap by filing the permits myself. Now the county had eyes on the house. I told Carter we needed to make the next move count. That afternoon, I called the sheriff's office and filed a vandalism report. 2 windows were cracked. The new gate I'd installed last week was lying in a ditch with tire marks across it. Someone had tried to jam the lock on the front door, too. It was bent, like someone shoved it with a crowbar. I reviewed the trail cam footage, and sure enough, there was Karen's son just 2 nights prior hurling rocks at the side of the house. Hoodie on, face mostly hidden, but not enough. I handed the footage over. Deputy Paulson came out again, this time less neutral than before. "Is she still claiming she doesn't know where the kid is?" he asked. "Last I heard, she said he was staying with friends." Well, he's about to be staying with us for a while if she doesn't get it together. We pressed charges: minor destruction of property, trespassing, and tampering with a private residence. No more playing nice. I spent the rest of the day ripping out half-rotted insulation, breathing through a mask, wondering what else was hidden in the walls. Every time I pulled down a piece of paneling and found more mold or makeshift wiring, I felt like I was excavating someone's lie brick by brick. By the time night fell, the house was darker than I remembered. Not because the lights didn't work, though they didn't, but because it didn't feel like home. It felt violated. I didn't sleep in the house. I camped in my truck again. Old habit, safety blanket. Except this time it wasn't fear of a squatter that kept me out. It was the feeling that her fingerprints were still all over everything, and I wasn't ready to scrub them off just yet. The call came from Carter while I was elbows deep in the crawl space, trying to trace a suspicious wire that seemed to connect to nothing and sparked when I touched it. "We've got something," he said, and I could tell by the tone it wasn't just good, it was lethal. "Please tell me it's not another surprise hearing." "Nope. Better. Remember those recordings Karen was making?" How could I forget? She had that recorder on her like a weapon. "Well," he continued, "her attorney submitted a few of them as evidence in her civil counterclaim, trying to show that you were hostile, intimidating, and, quote, threatened her family's safety. But guess what? She forgot to edit them. Not only that, one of them has her on tape talking about how she let the property go intentionally because the taxes were a burden, and she figured no one would touch it with a 10-foot pole." I sat back on the damp dirt under the house, grinning like a lunatic. "And this is on the record? Already filed. I'm submitting a motion to include it in our evidence. If the judge accepts it, and he should, it proves she knew the legal process played out and still tried to backdoor her way into reclaiming the property. Her claim of ignorance? Dead in the water." I climbed out of the crawl space with a spring in my step and the beginnings of an actual laugh. It felt weird laughing, like I had to teach myself how to do it again. That evening, I took the time to walk the perimeter of the property. It had been weeks since I looked at it all without flinching. I passed the rusted old mailbox with the name Wilmont barely visible under layers of chipped paint. I thought about painting it over, then decided to leave it for now, let it rot away on its own terms. Back inside, I started clearing out the living room when I found something unexpected wedged behind a collapsed section of drywall. A fireproof safe. It was small, dented, and locked tight. Took me nearly 2 hours and one bent crowbar to pry it open, but when I did, I found a stack of letters, receipts, and jackpot, the original estate filing notice from the county. And right on top, a signed document, Karen Wilmont. Waiver of inheritance rights. Dated. Witnessed. Stamped. I froze. I stared at it like it might combust in my hands. Then I read it again. And again. She didn't just forget to claim the house. She legally, formally gave it up, and then tried to claw it back after I bought it, knowing damn well what she'd done. By the next morning, Carter had a certified copy in his inbox, and within 48 hours, we'd submitted a new filing to the court. Not just a response, not just a rebuttal, a full-blown claim of fraudulent intent. "This changes everything," Carter said. "We're not just defending your ownership anymore. We're going on offense. We're proving she tried to manipulate the system, the media, and the court." "And the assessor?" He nodded. "Already flagged for internal review. If there's proof of collusion, the county will distance themselves fast." By Friday, subpoenas went out for Karen's communications with the assessor's office. And wouldn't you know it? Someone had been using their personal Gmail for a little too much family business. We got access to several emails. One in particular caught the judge's attention. Karen asking the assessor if there was a way to reclaim the house through friendly reassessment, and referencing a buyer who'd be willing to work with her timeline. The buyer's name? A Shell LLC registered 2 weeks before the auction. The contact address? A P.O. box rented in Karen's name. The judge granted a preliminary ruling that Karen's counterclaim was not only unfounded, but that there was strong evidence of deliberate misrepresentation and an attempt to manipulate property valuation for personal gain. Carter called me that night, his voice uncharacteristically cheerful. "She's cooked, Evan, it's over. You're going to win this." But I didn't feel like celebrating. Not yet. Not until it was official. Not until she was off the land, off the record, and preferably off my radar forever. Instead, I spent the night going through the rest of the safe's contents. Most of it was junk. Receipts, photos, expired licenses, but one envelope stood out. It was addressed to the next owner. Inside was a single note handwritten likely by Karen's father. "If you're reading this, then my daughter gave up this place and someone else has come to make it their own. I hope you treat it better than she treated me. This land deserves peace." I sat there for a long time reading those words over and over. I didn't know what kind of man he was, but I knew he'd understood exactly what she was capable of. Courtroom 3 smelled like old books and sweat. The kind of place where truth was supposed to be sacred, but everyone knew the right lie could still win. I sat next to Carter in a stiff wooden chair that creaked every time I shifted. Across from us sat Karen, in a charcoal blazer and an expression she probably practiced in front of a mirror. Equal parts dignified and wounded. Her new attorney, Brent Holloway, had bailed the moment things got ugly. Was a younger guy with a face like a milk carton and the energy of someone who still thought they could save their client. Karen, for her part, looked more annoyed than anxious, like this was an inconvenience, not a reckoning. The judge entered. Bang of the gavel. Then everything started unraveling. Carter opened with the basics. The property was sold via a legal tax lien auction. Karen had previously signed a waiver of inheritance rights. The original documents were authenticated and filed. Her presence in the house was unauthorized, her renovations unpermitted, and her claims, both legal and emotional, were built on sand. Then came the recordings. Carter submitted transcripts from the very audio Karen had introduced weeks earlier. One clip, clear as a bell, had her saying, "I knew the county would take it if I didn't pay. I figured it'd sit empty for years. Who'd want this dump?" And another, "Once it sells, I'll just move in and make it messy. No one wants to fight over old dirt." Karen's lawyer objected. The judge overruled. Then came the emails, the cozy little correspondence between Karen and the county assessor. The mention of reclaiming the property, the mysterious LLC set up in her name, the P.O. box she thought was anonymous. Each thread tightened the noose around her credibility. The judge didn't yell. He didn't have to. He read his decision slowly, like he wanted every syllable to land with weight. Karen's counterclaim was dismissed. My ownership was upheld. The court recognized the original sale as valid and lawful. Further, the judge acknowledged what he called a coordinated effort to circumvent proper legal procedure for personal gain, citing Karen's deliberate manipulation of public systems and bad faith actions. He didn't stop there. The court ordered Karen to pay damages, symbolic more than financial since her assets were likely buried in debt, and referred the matter of the assessor's misconduct to the district attorney's office. Karen's actions, the judge said, bordered on criminal trespass and fraud. It would be up to the county to decide how far to pursue it. She sat frozen as the judgment was read. For the first time, she looked smaller. Not defeated, not yet, but cracked. Like the mask finally slipped, and there wasn't much behind it but bitterness and calculation. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Karen pushed past them without a word. Her new lawyer followed, expression unreadable. Carter and I didn't say anything for a while. We just stood there on the courthouse steps, staring at the cloudy sky like we expected the verdict to change the weather. Then Carter turned to me and said, "Well, you still want the house?" It was a joke, but a good one. I laughed for real this time. The drive back up the mountain was different, lighter somehow. The same cracked road, same leaning trees, but the air didn't feel like it was pressing on my chest anymore. Neighbors who once avoided eye contact now waved. One even offered to help me clean up the place, a guy who'd signed the Save Wilmot petition a month ago. I guess people are quicker to shift allegiance than a weather vane in a tornado. I walked through the house again that night, alone. No threats, no locked doors, no recorders hidden under cushions. Still smelled like mold, still needed a new roof, still had walls patched with desperation and lies. But it was mine, unequivocally, legally, finally. I sat in the middle of the living room floor, surrounded by tools and busted wood and silence, and let the weight settle. Not the weight of fear, or anger, or paranoia, just exhaustion. And beneath it, the slow burn of something I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. 3 weeks after the court ruling, I replaced the front door, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. That old door had been witness to too much. The screaming, the lying, the sheriff's knocks, Karen's smug face peering out from behind it like she owned the place. I ripped it off the hinges and left it leaning against the woodshed like a carcass. The new door was solid oak, heavy, quiet, mine. It took a few more weeks to clear out the debris. Moldy insulation, broken appliances, weirdly passive-aggressive sticky notes Karen had left in kitchen drawers like Easter eggs. One read, "Good luck fixing what you stole." I laughed when I found that one. Then I burned it in the fireplace she'd tried to paint shut. Fall gave way to early snow. Up here, that happened fast. One day I was hammering new panels to the roof in a flannel shirt. The next I was shoveling a foot of powder off the front steps, wondering how anyone ever doubted this place had value. The townspeople came around mostly. A few apologized. Others just stopped pretending I was invisible. One old woman from the diner brought me a pie as a peace offering, which I guess is mountain town code for, "Sorry we thought you were a land-stealing bastard." Henry stopped by with a six-pack and a hand-drawn map of the mountain's old hiking trails. "Thought you might like to see what's out there. Lot of folks never do." He hung around for a bit, drinking one beer and telling stories about Karen's dad. Said he was a stubborn son of a bitch, but decent. The kind of man who didn't talk much, but when he did, people shut up and listened. "She wasn't like him," Henry said. "She thought the mountain owed her something." I nodded. I didn't say it, but I understood that mindset. I'd felt that way too once, like the world was supposed to reward me just for showing up. Then I bought a broken house full of ghosts and learned the truth the hard way. The week before Christmas, I found a box on my porch. No note, no name, just an old rusted mailbox, the one I'd ripped out months ago. Cleaned, painted over in red and white stripes like a candy cane, and taped shut with a bow. Inside was a single key, the old house key, no return address. I had my guesses. Maybe Karen had one last melodramatic gesture in her, or maybe her son, guilt blooming now that the smoke had cleared. Maybe it was just some local's way of saying, "You win." Either way, I mounted the thing on the wall above the fireplace, right where the safe had been. And then I finally had my first real night in the house, not camping outside, not checking for cameras, not sleeping with one eye open. Just me, a fire, a bottle of bourbon, and silence. I didn't fix everything right away. I took my time. I wanted the place to heal with me. Each nail I drove, each floorboard I sanded. It wasn't just carpentry, it was reclamation, not just of property, of peace. Sometimes I'd find remnants of Karen's time there. A tack in the wall where a picture used to hang. A faint smudge of cheap pink paint under a new coat of white. But they didn't bother me anymore. They were scars, nothing more. I threw a small get-together in January. Just a few neighbors, Henry, the waitress from the diner, even the sheriff. We grilled outside in the snow, drank whiskey that froze on the rim, and laughed at stories that didn't end in legal threats. At one point, someone pointed at the house and asked, "You ever think about naming it?" I shrugged. "What for?" Henry, tipsy and smug, raised his bottle. "Call it what it is, Fort Miller. Survived a siege, didn't it?" Everyone laughed. I didn't say anything, just looked up at the mountain beyond, the sky clearing into something cold and beautiful. Later that night, alone again, I stood in the living room and stared at the mailbox on the wall. The key inside glinted in the firelight. I almost took it out, almost threw it away. But I didn't, because it didn't matter who gave it to me. It only mattered who held it now.